The footage was 47 minutes long, and Margaret had not meant to watch any of it. She had been looking for something else entirely. A logistics dispute. One of her fleet drivers had reported a scrape on a company van, and the insurance team needed time-stamped visual evidence from the parking zone outside Lily's school, where the van had been sitting overnight. It was a Tuesday. It was 11:14 at night. Margaret had been in her corner office for 16 hours, and the cold coffee on her desk had not moved in 3 of them. She pulled up the archived footage. The camera was mounted high on a pole at the edge of the school's east parking lot, angled to capture vehicle entries and exits. She fast-forwarded. Vans. A delivery truck. A teacher's old sedan pulling in early. She slowed the playback. She was looking at license plates, not at the school building itself. But the camera's angle caught more than the parking lot. It caught the side of the building too. The narrow alley between the main entrance and the gymnasium. The concrete steps that led to the school's side door. The one the staff used in the mornings before the main building unlocked. Margaret had never thought about those steps. She had never had reason to. She almost kept fast-forwarding. The timestamp read 6:14 in the morning. The parking lot was empty except for one van, which was not her van, which meant it was irrelevant, which meant she should have moved on. She did not move on. There was a figure sitting on the steps. A yellow raincoat. Small. Knees pulled up to the chest. Hood down despite the gray October cold. Dark hair loose. A backpack beside her on the concrete like a small obedient animal. Margaret's hand stopped on the mouse. She knew that raincoat. She had bought it 2 Christmases ago from a department store in downtown Atlanta, because Lily had pointed at it exactly once while they were walking past, and had not asked for it, which was how Margaret had known she wanted it. She had gone back alone and bought it, and wrapped it in silver paper, and told herself she was good at this. She was good at noticing. She was a person who paid attention. She had not seen that raincoat in 8 months. She had assumed it was lost. She had not asked. The figure on the steps was Lily. Her daughter was at school before 6:30 in the morning, sitting alone on a concrete step in the cold, and Margaret had not known. She watched. She did not fast forward. At 6:17, a door opened. A man came out. Older, solid, moving with the particular unhurried pace of someone who has done the same thing every morning for years, and made a small peace with all of it. He was carrying a thermos. He looked at the girl on the steps, and he did not look surprised. He did not stop. He did not ask her anything. He walked to the far end of the step, sat down, and opened his thermos. They did not speak. Not for a long time. The parking lot footage continued recording. A pigeon landed on the hood of the wrong van. The timestamp ticked forward in the corner. Margaret did not look at the van or the pigeon or the timestamp. She looked at her daughter on the steps, at the way Lily's shoulders had changed. That was what she had not been able to name for the first 30 seconds of watching. The thing that had stopped her hand on the mouse before her brain had processed the yellow coat. Lily's shoulders were not hunched. In the house, in the kitchen in the mornings, Lily carried her shoulders like a question she did not want to be asked. Pulled forward, slightly inward, protective. Margaret had noticed it, and had not known what to do with it, and had told herself it was posture. It was teenage posture. She would mention it to the pediatrician at the next checkup. She had not scheduled the next checkup. On those concrete steps, in the cold, next to a man she did not know the name of, Lily's shoulders were down. They were just down, like they had nowhere to be. At 6:41, the side door opened again, and 2 other staff members came out, nodded at the man with the thermos, and went around the corner. 3 minutes later, the main school doors unlocked. Lily stood, picked up her backpack, and went inside. The man gathered his thermos. He paused for exactly 1 second, looked at the door she had gone through, and then went back inside himself. The parking lot was empty. Margaret sat in her office, with the footage paused on an empty frame, and did not move for 6 minutes. She was aware of the 6 minutes because she was always aware of time. She had trained herself to be. Time was the only resource she had never found a way to manufacture more of, no matter how much money she had. She sat in those 6 minutes, and looked at the empty steps, and the audit report open in another window, and the cold coffee she had not drunk. She did not close the footage. She went to the folder's index and pulled up the previous 2 weeks. She was going to understand this. That was what she told herself. She was going to gather information before she made a decision. That was how she operated. That was how she had built everything. You do not react to a single data point. You look at the pattern. The pattern was this. Lily arrived at the side steps at 6:10, give or take a few minutes. Every single school day, she was always there before the door opened. She always sat in the same spot. Second step from the bottom, left side. The man with the thermos came out at 6:17 on the days he opened, 6:22 on the days someone else unlocked the building first. He always sat at the far end of the step. He always brought the thermos. Some mornings they talked. Some mornings they did not talk at all, and the silence between them looked like something they had both agreed on. Margaret watched 14 days of footage, 14 mornings, 14 thermos. 14 times her daughter had woken up, dressed, eaten or not eaten whatever was in the kitchen, and gone to sit on concrete steps in the early cold, with a man whose name Margaret did not know. She had driven Lily to school 3 times in those 14 days. She remembered one of them. She had been on a call. She remembered telling Lily to text her when she got inside, and then forgetting to check whether Lily had texted, and then remembering at 4 in the afternoon, and checking, and seeing that Lily had in fact texted. She had felt, at 4 in the afternoon, that this meant everything was fine. She pulled up October 3rd. She did not know why she pulled up October 3rd specifically. Something in the back of her mind, the part that was not running logistics reports and merger timelines, had flagged it without telling her. She found October 3rd and pressed play. Lily was already there when the camera feed started at 6:01. She was sitting with her knees up and her face turned away from the camera. The man with the thermos came out at 6:19. He sat down. He poured. He set a cup on the step between them. At 6:26, Lily's shoulders moved differently. It took Margaret a moment to understand what she was seeing. The footage was grainy. The light was the particular colorless gray of very early morning. But she watched her daughter's back and she saw the way the shoulders moved, slightly forward and then down, the way someone's body moves when a sound comes out of it that they were trying to keep in. Lily was sitting on a step outside her school at 6:26 in the morning on October 3rd, and she was crying. The man with the thermos did not move toward her. He did not put an arm around her. He did not hand her anything. He set his cup down on the step beside him, and he looked forward at the parking lot, the same way he always looked, and he stayed. He just stayed. Margaret sat very still and watched this. October 3rd was the anniversary of her divorce from Lily's father. A divorce that had happened when Lily was 6 years old, a fact Margaret had processed and filed and moved past with the same efficiency she applied to everything painful, which was to say, she had decided it was done, and therefore it would not continue to cost her anything. She had been in Singapore for a conference on October 3rd. She had sent Lily a text that said, "Call me tonight if you want to talk," and Lily had responded with a thumbs-up emoji, and Margaret had gone into her dinner meeting and told herself that was handled. She watched October 3rd 3 times. The third time she watched it, she stopped the footage at 6:26 and looked at her daughter's back, and the man sitting at the far end of the step, and the 2 cups of something hot between them, and she did something she had not done in a conference room, or a boardroom, or any room with another person in it, for 11 years. She pulled her reading glasses off and pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. The office was very quiet. The city outside was doing what cities do at 11 at night. Carrying on, indifferent, full of lit windows and other people's problems. Margaret Osei sat with her hand over her mouth and looked at a grainy recording of her daughter surviving a morning she had not known about. She pulled the man's employee file. His name was Elias Ferreira, 61 years old, Portuguese national, naturalized citizen, 23 years in the country. He had been employed by the school district as a custodial staff member for 6 years. His emergency contact line read, "None listed." His last performance review had been completed by a district administrator who had never, based on any record Margaret could find, actually visited the school. The review said, "Satisfactory." Margaret looked at that word for a long time. She thought about what satisfactory meant. She thought about all the things that word covered and all the things it missed. She thought about a man who brought a thermos every single morning to a job that paid him not quite enough to live on in this city, who sat at a careful and respectful distance from a 14-year-old girl, who was struggling through mornings her mother did not know were difficult, and who stayed without making it a performance, who was present without making it about himself. Satisfactory. She opened her legal pad. She wrote down his name. Then she wrote the word thermos beside it, because she could not stop thinking about the thermos, about who thinks to do that, who carries warmth into a job like this with no expectation that anyone will notice. She stared at what she had written. Then she crossed it out. She looked back at the screen. The footage was still paused on October 3rd. Lily's back, the steps, the empty parking lot behind them. She had a company with 412 employees. She had 3 buildings. She had a penthouse apartment with a kitchen that Lily had stopped eating breakfast in 8 months ago. And she had told herself it was a phase, and a teenage thing, and something that would resolve itself. And she had been waiting, she realized now, sitting alone in her office at nearly midnight, for it to resolve itself, without her having to do anything that would require her to stop moving. She closed the footage. She opened her calendar for the next morning and looked at the 6 to 8 slot. 2 calls. One was with a vendor in Hong Kong. One was with her assistant about a board presentation. She moved them both. She sat with the empty calendar slot and the legal pad and the crossed-out word and the name of a man her daughter trusted, and she did not yet know what she was going to do with any of it. But she was going to do something. She was certain of that, in the way she was certain of very few things that did not involve numbers. Something had been happening every morning at 6:17 outside her daughter's school. Something quiet and small and necessary. And Margaret had been in Singapore, or on calls, or fast-forwarding past it. She was not going to fast-forward past it anymore. She came back to the office at 2 in the morning, after going home, and standing in the hallway outside Lily's door for 4 minutes without knocking. The light under the door was off. She could hear nothing. She stood there with her hand not quite raised, and then she went to her own room, and lay on top of the covers in her work clothes, and looked at the ceiling, and thought about October 3rd, until 4, when she gave up on sleep, and went back to the office. She pulled every week of archived footage the server still held. She watched 11 weeks of mornings, 4 hours of footage. She took notes on the legal pad, not because she needed to, but because doing something with her hands kept the thing in her chest from doing whatever it was trying to do. October 3rd, the day Lily cried. September 9th, the first day Margaret could find where Lily arrived before 6:15. Before that, Lily was not in the footage at all. Something had changed in the first week of September. Margaret went back through her own calendar from that period. A new school year. A new grade. She had been traveling for 3 of the first 4 weeks of the semester. She had hired a driver to take Lily on the days she was away. She found the day on the footage. September 8th. Lily arriving late, after the doors opened, which was normal. September 9th. Lily, on the steps at 6:12, alone. The man with the thermos, not yet aware she was there, coming out at 6:17, and stopping for just half a second before sitting down. He had not been surprised by 6:17 of October 3rd, because he had already been doing this for 7 weeks. Margaret wrote September 9th on the legal pad. She looked at what she had written, the name, the date, the word she had crossed out. She picked up her pen and wrote one more thing underneath all of it. She wrote, "What did I miss before September 8th?" She looked at that for a while. Then she put the pen down, pressed both palms flat on the desk, and made a decision. She was going to meet Elias Ferreira, professionally, properly. She would not arrive unannounced at his workplace with feelings she did not know how to carry. She would frame it correctly, as a gesture of appreciation, something her company's community outreach branch could support. She would meet him, and she would understand what he had seen in her daughter that she had missed, and then she would know what to do next. She told herself this was a plan. She told herself she was good at plans. She looked at the empty calendar slot she had made at 6 the next morning, and she thought about concrete steps, and November cold, and a thermos and shoulders that were not hunched, and she knew the plan was only partly true. The rest of it was something she did not have a word for yet, something that had been sitting in her chest since 6:26 on October 3rd, quiet and still, not going anywhere. She was going to have to learn to sit with it. She picked up her glasses, put them back on, and went back to work. The drive to the school the next morning took 11 minutes. Margaret had lived in this city for 19 years, and she had never driven this route at 5:50 in the morning. The streets were a different city at this hour. Quieter. Smaller. The traffic lights changed for no one. A man walked a dog in a yellow circle of streetlight, and the dog looked up at the passing car with the mild curiosity of a creature who expects nothing dramatic from the world. Margaret parked in the staff lot and sat in the car for 3 minutes. She was wearing the wrong coat. She had not thought about the temperature on those steps, which was the kind of thing she would never have failed to calculate for a board presentation, and had completely failed to calculate for this, and she felt the oversight in a way that was sharper than it should have been. She got out of the car and walked to the steps. The concrete was exactly as cold as it looked on the footage. She sat down on the second step from the bottom, left side, and waited. She did not know why she sat on Lily's exact spot. She had not decided to. Her body had simply gone there. At 6:17, the side door opened. Elias Ferreira came out with his thermos and looked at her the way he had looked at the parking lot every morning for 11 weeks. Steady, without performance, taking in what was in front of him and making no drama of it. He was taller than she had expected. The footage had compressed him. He had gray at his temples and a face that had spent a great deal of time outside and hands that looked like they had done real work for a very long time. He said, "You must be Lily's mom." Not Ms. Osei. Not the CEO of anything. Not the woman who reviewed his employee file at 1 in the morning. Lily's mom. Margaret opened her mouth to give her full name and title, because that was what she always did, and then she heard what he had just said and she closed her mouth again. She said, "Yes." He nodded and sat down at the far end of the step, the same place he always sat, the same careful distance. He unscrewed the thermos and poured without asking her, set a cup on the step between them. The steam rose and vanished in the cold air. Margaret looked at it for a moment. Then she wrapped both hands around it. She said, "I wanted to speak with you, about Lily." He said, "I figured." She asked him what they talked about, the two of them, on these mornings. He thought about this for a moment with the particular patience of a man who was not interested in answering quickly just to fill silence. He said, "Nothing much. School sometimes. Her drawings. Sometimes nothing at all." He looked at the parking lot. She needed somewhere to put the mornings. I had mornings to spare. Margaret sat with that. Somewhere to put the mornings. She turned the phrase over in her mind and could not find a place to file it. She had a system for almost everything she encountered. This did not fit. She asked him why he had not reported it. Lily sitting outside before school. A young girl alone in the dark and cold. There were protocols. There were counselors. He looked at her, not unkindly, and said, she was not in danger. She was in the cold. He let that sit. Then he said, "There is a difference." Margaret looked at the parking lot. A crow landed on the asphalt and looked at them with the suspicious intelligence of a creature that has learned that humans sometimes have food and are often disappointing. The crow determined they had nothing and flew away. She asked him how long it had been going on. He said, "Since September, maybe longer, on days I was not the first one out." She said, "She did not tell me." He did not respond to this. He did not say, "Of course not," or "You were never there," or any of the things that were true, and that she had been saying to herself all night. He just drank from his thermos and let the silence be a silence. She said, "Do you have children?" He shook his head. He said he had had a wife, once. For 21 years. She had passed 4 years ago. He said this the same way he said everything. Evenly, without reaching for sympathy. Margaret said she was sorry. He nodded. She looked at the cup between them and thought about a man who had lost the person he had been 21 years close to, and who came to work every morning at 6, and brought a thermos and poured without being asked. She thought about what that cost, and what it meant, that someone could lose that much and still think to pour. She said, "I want to do something. For you. To recognize what you have done for her." He looked at her. His expression was not unfriendly and it was not exactly warm. It was the expression of a man who had been given satisfactory ratings for 6 years and had learned not to want things from institutions. He said, "You do not need to do anything for me." She said, "I know I don't need to." He looked at the parking lot again, a long pause. Then he said, "If you want to do something, then come earlier tomorrow." She looked at him. He said, "She gets here at 6:10. He said it simply, with no weight on it. No accusation. No instruction beyond the fact of it. 6:10. Margaret's first call had previously started at 6:30, and she had moved it, and now it started at 8, and she had 6:10 free, and he knew none of that, and none of it mattered. He stood, capped the thermos, and nodded at her once. He went back inside. Margaret sat alone on the steps. The cold came up through the concrete. The crow was gone. The parking lot was empty. She picked up the cup he had poured for her and took a sip. It was tea. Strong and plain. Not coffee. Not the elaborate expensive thing she drank at her desk. Tea. The kind that asked nothing of you. She sat there until the doors opened and the first teachers began arriving, and a security light above the entrance clicked off, because the sun had finally decided to show up. Then she stood, took the cup inside with her, rinsed it in the small staff bathroom sink, and left it on the edge of the counter where she had found it. She drove back to the office. She had 5 hours before her first real meeting. She sat at her desk and opened her laptop and stared at it for a moment. Then she opened a new document and typed Lily's name at the top of it. She had no idea what she was going to write. She had never done anything like this. She sat with the cursor blinking, and then she typed one sentence underneath the name. She typed, she needed somewhere to put the mornings. She looked at it. She saved the document and closed it, and went to work. Lily was in her room when Margaret came home. This was not unusual. Lily was in her room most evenings. She had been in her room most evenings for 8 months, and Margaret had understood this as the natural gravity of adolescence, a phase, a developmental thing, a door that would eventually open again. She had read an article about it. She had been reassured by the article. She had not questioned the article. She knocked. 3 times, sharp. She heard herself do it, and recognized it as her office knock. The knock she used when she needed someone's attention immediately, because time was moving, and she could not think of how else to knock, because she had not knocked on this door enough to have a different knock for it. The door opened. Lily was 14, in the way that 14 is its own specific country. She had Margaret's height, and her father's eyes, and a face that was currently arranged in the expression she saved for interruptions, patient, reserved, waiting to see what was wanted. Margaret looked at her daughter. She had a speech prepared. She had organized her thoughts on the drive home. 3 points. Clear, direct, no unnecessary preamble. She said, "I saw footage from your school." Lily went still. Not the stillness of someone surprised. The stillness of someone who had been waiting for this, and had not known when it would arrive, and was now receiving it. Margaret told her about the footage. Not about October 3rd. She was not ready to say October 3rd out loud yet, and she was not going to say it until she could say it without her voice doing something she did not intend. She told Lily what she had seen. The steps. The mornings. The man with the thermos. Lily did not speak for several seconds. Her eyes moved slightly to the right, the way they did when she was thinking about how to answer something, a habit she had had since she was very small. Then she said, "He lets me just be there. He doesn't try to fix it." She said it quietly, without edges. It was not an accusation. She did not say, "And you always try to fix things," or "unlike you." She said it like a report, like something that was simply and only true. That was the hardest part. Margaret looked at her daughter, and then passed her into the room, and she saw the sketchbook open on the bed. Lily drew constantly. She always had. Margaret bought her sketchbooks 4 at a time from the art supply store, and brought them home and left them on the kitchen counter, and Lily took them without comment. It had felt, until this moment, like a system that worked. The sketchbook was open to a drawing. Margaret could see it from the doorway. A man on steps, seen from above, slightly tilted, bird's eye in the way of someone looking down at a scene from a height. The thermos on the step beside him. The empty parking lot below. The angle was not a memory. The angle was a camera. Lily had drawn the view from the security camera. She had sat on those steps every morning, knowing the camera was there, knowing what it captured, knowing that the footage existed and could be reviewed. She had let herself be seen. Margaret stood in the doorway and held that knowledge very carefully, because she felt that if she moved too quickly with it, she would break something. She did not ask about the drawing. She looked at the bed. She looked at Lily. She moved to the edge of the bed and sat down. Not at the headboard, not crowding. At the foot, the same careful distance, the same way the man with the thermos had always sat. Lily did not ask her to leave. She stood by the door for another moment, and then she moved and sat on the desk chair beside the window, rotating it slightly away, looking at the window rather than at her mother. She picked up a pencil and held it without drawing anything. Margaret looked at her hands in her lap. She had sat in boardrooms with people who were trying to take things from her, people who were waiting for her to make a mistake, people who had underestimated her for 20 years and discovered the cost of that. She had sat in those rooms calm and certain, and completely in control. She had no idea how to sit in this room. She said, "I moved my morning calls." Lily's pencil stopped. Margaret said, "I am going to be at the steps tomorrow, at 6:10. The room was quiet. Lily did not look at her. She looked at the window. Outside the window was a tree that had been there since they moved into this house 9 years ago, and that Lily had attempted to climb twice at age 7, and that Margaret had subsequently told her not to climb, and that Lily had subsequently never climbed again. After a long time, Lily said, "Eli pours the tea." Margaret said, "I know." Lily looked at her then, just for a moment. Then she looked back at the window. Margaret sat at the foot of the bed until the silence became something they were both inside, rather than something between them. And then she said goodnight, and stood, and went to the door. She paused in the doorway. She did not say anything else. She had said what needed to be said. She had sat where she had needed to sit. She went to her own room. She did not lie on top of the covers this time. She changed her clothes and got into bed, and turned the light off and lay in the dark for a while. She thought about Lily's drawing, the camera angle, the choice to sit in the frame of something she knew could be reviewed, leaving a record that could be found. She had been telling her mother where she was. Margaret lay in the dark and thought about all the footage she had never looked at until last night, all the mornings that had recorded and looped and overwritten themselves, and she thought that this was the thing about time, the thing she had never been able to solve no matter how precisely she managed it, which was that it did not wait for you to be ready to pay attention. It just kept recording. She was awake for a long time, but not the way she had been awake the night before. This was different. This was the feeling of something shifting position, something large and internal, making room. She was asleep before midnight, for the first time in 7 months. She was at the steps at 6:04. 6 minutes early. She had not planned on 6 minutes early. She had planned on 6:10. She had woken at 5:15, which was normal, and had moved through her morning with unusual calm, and had gotten in the car and arrived, and it was 6:04 and the steps were empty, and the November air was the kind of cold that asks something of you. She sat down on the second step from the bottom right side. Not Lily's spot. Adjacent. She had brought nothing with her. No phone in her hand, no folder, no laptop bag. She had left the phone in her coat pocket, and the pocket was buttoned, and she decided it would stay buttoned. Her hands were cold. She folded them in her lap. The city made its early morning sounds. A bus somewhere on the main road. A bird that could not decide if it was awake. The particular silence that is not actually silence, but is the sound of a world that has not yet been asked anything of. She heard footsteps at 6:10. Lily came around the corner of the building and stopped. She was wearing the yellow raincoat. Margaret had not seen it on her since the footage. It was the same one, unmistakably the same. Still bright against the gray morning, the hood pushed back, her hair loose. She stopped and looked at her mother on the steps. 2 seconds. 3. Then she walked forward and sat down. Not next to Margaret. Not exactly. She sat at the center of the step between where Margaret was and where she usually sat. The middle position. Equidistant. No one crowded. Enough room for everyone. The door opened at 6:17. Elias Ferreira came out and saw them both. He did not react the way most people would have reacted to a surprise. He simply took in the new arrangement, and what Margaret thought she saw in his face, just for a moment, was not satisfaction exactly, but something quieter and more earned than satisfaction. Something that belonged to a man who had been doing a small and careful thing for a long time, in the hope that it was not entirely invisible. He sat in his usual spot. He poured 3 cups. He did not say anything. Neither did Margaret. Neither did Lily. There was nothing, in this particular arrangement on these particular steps, that needed to be said. Lily opened her sketchbook, not to the camera angle drawing. A new page. She set it on her knee, and looked out at the parking lot for a moment, the same way Elias always looked, and then she began to draw. Margaret looked at the parking lot too. She tried to see what they saw in it, what made it worth looking at, and at first she saw only a parking lot, asphalt and painted lines and the ordinary furniture of an ordinary school morning. But then she looked longer. The light was doing something specific at this hour, coming in low and sideways, the way it only did in November, turning the ordinary asphalt into something that held color it did not know it had. She had never seen this particular light before. She had always been on a call at this hour. Elias refilled her cup without her asking. She drank it. Lily drew something. Margaret did not look to see what it was. She looked at the parking lot, at the light, at the crow that had appeared again on the asphalt, and was conducting its daily investigation of whether humans had improved. The doors opened. The school filled with sound, the particular sound of young people arriving at a place they mostly tolerate, loud and layered, and then it quieted as they went inside and the doors swung shut. Lily closed her sketchbook. She stood and picked up her backpack. She looked at Margaret. Not quite a smile, not quite an expression that had a name, something that was its own thing and did not need a name. She went inside. Elias stood. He gathered his thermos, nodded at Margaret, and went back through the door he had come from. Margaret sat alone on the steps. She looked at the 3 cups on the step. She looked at the parking lot. She looked at the security camera above her, up and to the left, mounted on its pole at the edge of the lot, its lens aimed down at the scene with the impartial attention of a thing that records but does not judge. She knew what the camera was capturing. She had reviewed enough footage to know exactly how this looked from that angle. 2 adults and a young girl on concrete steps, a thermos, 3 cups, a sketchbook now closed and gone inside. Somewhere on a server, a recording was being made. At the end of 4 hours it would loop. It would overwrite itself. The footage would be gone. Nobody was going to review it. Nobody needed to. Margaret sat on the steps in the November light with the cold coming up through the concrete into her bones, and she did not move for a long time, and she did not check her phone, and she did not think about the board meeting at 9, or the vendor call at 10:30, or the quarterly figures that were due Friday. She looked at the light on the parking lot. She thought, this is what she came here for, every morning, before I knew to come. She thought, I am going to come tomorrow. She thought, I should have come sooner. But that last thought she let go of, because it was the kind of thought that ate time without giving anything back, and she had spent enough of her life in meetings with people who were very good at taking things without giving anything back, and she had learned to recognize those things and end them. She stood. She picked up the 3 cups and took them inside and rinsed them at the staff sink and left them on the counter the way she had the morning before. She walked to her car. She drove to her office. She went upstairs and sat at her desk and opened her laptop. And before she opened anything else, before the emails and the reports and the calendar reminders, she opened the document with Lily's name at the top. Underneath the one sentence she had typed 3 weeks ago, she added another. She typed, she was always leaving a door open. She looked at it. Then she typed, I am learning to come in. She saved the document. She closed it. She opened her email. She went to work. Outside, on the steps she had just left, the security camera continued its patient and indifferent recording of an empty parking lot. The ordinary November light, the 3 rings on the concrete where the cups had sat, already fading in the cold. It recorded, and it recorded. It asked nothing of anyone. It was more than enough.